খেলার গভীর জলে রং লেগেছে বনসভায়, গোলাপ চাপা রঙিন জবায়, মেঘের রং ফোটায় পলে পলে, রাজমহলের রাজা হুকুম করে রঙের আসন সাজা। অমনি সকল কথা ঘটে, ভেসে আসে হাওয়ার স্রোতে, পুরনো কেনা নিয়ে করে তাজা, তাদের আসল বাহির ভুবনে ফেলে শেখায় রঙের নেশায় মেতে। আমার এরা গোপন প্রাণে, আমার এরা গোপন গানে, রঙের আসল ফেরারিতে পেতে।
James Watson, avoid boring people. Remember lessons. Never be the brightest person in a room. Getting out of intellectual ruts more often than not requires unexpected intellectual juice. Nothing can replace the company of others who have the background to catch errors in your reasoning or provide facts that may either prove or disprove your argument of the moment. And the sharper those around you, the sharper you will become. It is contrary to human nature and especially to human male nature, but being the top dog in the pack can work against greater accomplishments. Much better to be the least accomplished chemist in a super chemistry department than the superstar in a less lustrous department. But by the early 1950s, Linus Pauling's scientific interactions with fellow scientists were effectively monologues instead of dialogues. He then wanted adoration, not criticism. Work with a teammate who is your intellectual equal. Two scientists acting together usually accomplish more than two loners, each going their own way. The best scientific pairings are marriages of convenience in which they bring together the complementary talents of those involved. Given, for example, Francis's penchant for high-level crystallographic theory, there was no need for me also to master it. All I needed were its implications for interpreting DNA X-ray photographs. The possibility, of course, existed that Francis might err in some fashion I couldn't spot, but keeping good relations with others in the field outside our partnership meant that he would always have these ideas checked by others with even greater crystallographic talents. For my part, I thought I brought to our two-man team a deep understanding of biology and a compulsive enthusiasm for solving what proved to be a fundamental problem of life. In film, mise-en-scène and analysis. In starting to think about film's material specificity, it might seem odd to take instruction from another scholarly discipline, yet we can learn from American new critics, a dominant force in literary study before the Second World War, when they identify a scene called hearsay or paraphrase. They have in mind readings of a text which attempt prematurely to say what it means and show, by contrast, little interest in or even no knowledge of how it means. The paraphrasing heretic is liable to summarize what a Shakespeare sonnet expresses about true love, but say more about how the poem's thematic implications only emerge through its detailed transaction of versification, transaction and meta. The result is a disembodied kind of literary criticism, curiously obtuse about the textures of its own object of study. Much of the discourse on film, with which we are most familiar, is weakened by similar insensitivity towards the particularities of its primary material. The reader of most newspaper film reviews or watcher of popular TV programs on cinema encounters precisely heresies of paraphrase. Such works summarizes a film's narrative contents but tends not to comment on its material qualities, its modes of cinematography, say, or its key editing choices, or its distinctively fashioned soundtracks. Yet to be concerned with such issues of cinematic form is not indulgent or somehow minor in relation to more ambitious projects we should have as film scholars. On the contrary, any attempt to place a given film in a larger cultural or ideological context is itself inadequate if it does not include some reckoning with the work's distinctive form. The formal strategies of a film text are not neutral or background facts, but meaning generating processes. Another insight originating in literary criticism is again equally persuasive for film studies. The meaning of art is completely inseparable from all the details of its material body. P.N. Medvedev, M.M. Bakhtin, The Formal Method in Literary Scholarship, Baltimore and London, Johns Hopkins University Press, 1978, page 12. Film's material body is the subject of his book's first three chapters. Before turning to editing and soundtrack, we begin with the account of film's visual phenomenon, grouped together under the French term mise en scène. Defining mise en scène, what is mise en scène? Asked Jacques Rivette, a key member of the Nouvelle Vague or New Wave, the group of filmmaker critics who energized French cinema in the late 1950s and 60s. My apologies for asking such a hazardous question with either preparation nor permeable, particularly when I have no intention of answering it. Only should this question not always inform of our liberations. Jim Hiller ed. Cahiers du Cinéma, Volume 1, London, Routledge and Kagan Paul, 1985, page 134. While Rivette's skirting away here from an emphatic edition of mise en scène is alarming, he valuably insists upon the fundamental importance for film studies of engagement with matters of visual style. What is it that we see and give any significance to as we watch films? Consider the start of American Beauty 1999 as a fade-in takes the viewer from a black screen disclosing nothing to a scene abundant in visual information. When the scene opens, we see a young woman lying on a bed. Even as this figure stays silent, the spectator begins interpretive work, making provisional assessments of the significance of her location and of her body position and clothing. We might also register the harsh lighting scheme, linking this detail tentatively to the woman's lack of flattering makeup and glamorous clothing as evidence of her distance from stereotypical feminine image. For the moment, we may be content to gather and process these particular visual contents of the scene, contents that can be arranged under the subheadings of setting, props, costume, and lighting. To this should be added to the category of acting while the woman lies still. However, our eye may be more mobile and inquisitive still, registering not merely the figure on the bed, but also the distinctive ways in which shots of her are composed. What are the implications of the camera's proximity to her, admitting no other business presence into the visual field? and what seems indicated by the texture of the image itself, shot in grainy video rather than customary 35 mm film. Jonathan Swift was born in Dublin 1667, the son of an Anglo-English parents. After attending school in Ireland, he moved to England and reluctantly chose a career in the church. There he worked for Sir William Temple and lived as a member of his household. It was at Temple's that he met Esther Johnson, known as Stella in his letters, with whom he fell in love. She was much younger than he, and Swift played a large role in her education and the formation of her character. He was devoted to her and she to him, yet their relationship has been the subject of much debate. It has never been known for sure why they never married or whether they married secretly. While in England, Swift discovered his remarkable talent as a satirist and began writing on corruption in religion and education. His powerful works, Tale of a Tub and The Battle of the Books, were published in 1704 at the age of 31. Swift returned to England as a chaplain to a Lord Justice. Throughout his life, he was active in politics, a staunch Tory, a supporter of the Irish resistance to English oppression, and a devoted member of the Anglican Church. Although many have looked at the darker side of Swift's personality as a dominant one, he was a possessor of a social charm and wit that won him friendships with men like Addison, Pope, Steele, and Bolingbroke. His eccentric and some thought insane behavior may have caused by Meniere's disease, a syndrome that affects the inner ear and causes dizziness, nausea, deafness, from which he suffered most of his life. Despite his affliction, Swift maintained his energy and wit. It was in later life that he wrote a more modest proposal, 1729, and his ironic masterpiece, Gulliver's Travel, 1726. A great writer of English prose, Jonathan Swift, died on October 19, 1745, and was buried beneath the Latin epitaph that he himself composed. It reads in English, "He has gone where savage indignation can lacerate his heart no more." One satire in general and of Jonathan Swift in particular, this may safely be prognosticated and that they will endure. Satire seems to require categorically only two conditions, a subject and a satirist. Given our post-Lapsarian stage, frailty and fallibility are sufficient subjects and the details abound. But of the shaping hand of the satirist, qualifications are to be made. For satire is a strict art, despite all the difficulties we have encountered in defining that art neatly. We are all often indignant and sometimes witty about our indignations, but we do not thereby turn satirists. For it is not only the anger and the involvement, the idealism and the wit, but the manipulation of them, how they turn to formful, organic use that constitute the satiric art. Among the genres of literature, satire exerts a perennial fascination, the fascination of the forbidden, often hostile, shocking, destructive. Satire tends to approach the thin end of cynicism and misanthropy, to frighten or disgust, but the positive purpose that impels the satirist neutralizes, justifies, and heals by his intention to correct and reform, by his essential moralism. Thus, the entire nature of satire is ambivalent, complex, and elusive. Rhetorically, satire challenges from the beginning For strictly speaking, it cannot be defined. It is not accurately a genre, though we often call it so, yet it seems to usurp other genres, function as though it were one. A satirical novel, a satirical sonnet, for example, become primarily satire, and the novel or sonnet characteristics more often than not become subsidiary to the satiric intention. Yet, if satire is only a mode, a tone, a manner of speaking, does it thereby function as a kind of a pervasive metaphor so crucial that it determines the characteristics of the genre within which it is operating? For operate satire does within almost any genre, in all kinds of lyric poetry, from epic to song, in a tragedy as well as comedy, in prose as well as in poetry. But satire flourishes just as comfortably in the non-formal areas of composition in prose and poetry, in sermon tract broadside, in the most occasional rhymed squib.